What happens when the giant that once defined the future of computing begins to stumble? Imagine a company that powered the personal computer revolution, that shaped the way billions of people interacted with technology, suddenly finding itself outpaced, outmaneuvered, and struggling to hold on to relevance. This is not just a story about a corporation. This is a story about how quickly dominance in the tech world can vanish, how innovation can slip through the cracks, and how the mighty can fall. Today, we're diving deep into the fall of Intel, a company that once stood as the undisputed king of microprocessors, and now finds itself fighting to stay alive in a world it helped create. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear will change the way you look at technology, competition, and the future of computing itself. Intel was once the heartbeat of Silicon Valley. If you grew up in the 90s or early 2000s, you'd probably remember the iconic Intel Inside sticker on your computer. That logo wasn't just branding, it was a badge of honor. It meant your machine was powered by the best, the fastest, the most reliable chip on the market. Intel's processors were everywhere, from desktops to laptops, from servers to gaming rigs. The company practically defined the PC era. But here's the twist. The same company that dominated the computing landscape for decades is now struggling to keep pace with competitors like AMD, Apple, and even companies that weren't even in the processor game 20 years ago, like NVIDIA. How did this happen? How did Intel go from being the leader to lagging behind? To understand Intel's fall, we need to rewind. For decades, Intel's strategy was simple. Build the fastest CPUs, push Moore's law to its limits, and rely on its manufacturing dominance. Intel wasn't just designing chips, it was building them in its own fabs, cutting-edge technology that competitors couldn't match. This vertical integration gave Intel a massive advantage. But somewhere along the way, cracks began to show. While Intel was focused on incremental improvements, competitors were thinking differently. AMD, for example, took bold risks with its Ryzen architecture, delivering more cores, better efficiency, and competitive pricing. Apple decided to ditch Intel entirely, creating its own ARM-based chips that shocked the industry with their performance. And NVIDIA, once just a graphics company, started pushing into AI and data centers. Areas where Intel had been slow to adapt. The turning point came when Intel began missing deadlines. In the world of semiconductors, timing is everything. Intel promised new manufacturing nodes, smaller transistors, faster chips, but delays piled up. The company struggled to move from 14 nanometers to 10 nanometers. While competitors were already pushing ahead with 7 nanometers and beyond, these delays weren't just technical hiccups. They were strategic disasters. Every missed deadline gave AMD more room to grow, gave Apple more confidence to go its own way, and gave NVIDIA more time to expand into markets Intel had neglected. Suddenly, the company that once set the pace was falling behind. But Intel's problems weren't just technical. They were cultural. For years, Intel operated like a monopoly. When you're the biggest player, it's easy to become complacent. Decisions get slower, bureaucracy grows, and innovation takes a back seat. Meanwhile, competitors were hungry, agile, and willing to take risks. AMD's comeback story is legendary precisely because it was underestimated. Apple's bold move to design its own chips was seen as risky, but it paid off spectacularly. Intel, on the other hand, seems stuck in the past, relying on its legacy rather than reinventing itself for the future. Now, let's talk about the impact. Intel's decline isn't just about losing market share. It's about losing influence. Think about this. When Apple announced its M1 chip, the tech world was stunned. Here was a chip that outperformed Intel's offerings in laptops, with better battery life, lower heat, and incredible efficiency. Suddenly, Intel wasn't the default choice anymore. Consumers started asking questions. Why should I buy a laptop with Intel inside when Apple's chip is faster, cooler, and more efficient? That question spread beyond Apple. Gamers started flocking to AMD Ryzen processors. Data centers began exploring alternatives. Intel's grip on the market was slipping, and once consumers lose faith, it's hard to win them back. here's where things get even more interesting. Intel's fall isn't just about competition. It's about missing the next wave of computing. While Intel was focused on CPUs, the world was shifting toward GPUs, AI accelerators, and specialized chips. NVIDIA saw this coming and invested heavily in AI hardware. Apple saw this coming and built chips optimized for machine learning. Intel, meanwhile, was late to the party. By the time it started investing in AI and GPUs, competitors had already established dominance. In the fast-moving world of tech, being late is often the same as being irrelevant. Now, you might be wondering, can Intel recover? That's the million-dollar question. The company still has resources, talent, and brand recognition. It's not going to disappear overnight. But recovery requires more than just money. It requires vision, bold leadership, and the willingness to take risks. Intel needs to reinvent itself, to stop chasing competitors and start leading again. The problem is, in today's world, reinvention is harder than ever. Consumers are skeptical, competitors are stronger, and the pace of innovation is relentless. Intel's challenge isn't just to catch up, it's to prove that it still matters. Intel's story is a warning to every tech giant. Dominance today doesn't guarantee dominance tomorrow. The fall of Intel shows us that even the biggest players can stumble if they lose sight of the future. If you're watching this, think about the companies you trust today. The brands you assume will always be there. What happens if they start missing deadlines, if they stop innovating, if they get complacent? Intel's fall is not just about chipsets, about the fragility of success in the tech world. Before we go deeper, let me ask you to do something. If you're finding this story eye-opening, if you're realizing how quickly the tech landscape can change, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. This channel is all about uncovering the hidden stories behind the headlines. The rise and fall of companies that shape our world. By subscribing, you'll be part of a community that doesn't just consume technology, but understands it. And trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Now let's continue. Intel's decline also raises questions about America's role in the global semiconductor industry. For decades, Intel was a symbol of American innovation. But as Intel stumbled, companies in Taiwan, South Korea, and elsewhere surged ahead. TSMC, for example, became the world's leading chip manufacturer, producing chips for Apple, AMD, and countless others. While Intel struggled with manufacturing delays, TSMC was pushing boundaries, delivering cutting-edge nodes that left Intel in the dust. This shift isn't just about business, it's about geopolitics. Semiconductors are the backbone of modern technology, from smartphones to fighter jets. If American companies lose their edge, it has implications far beyond the marketplace. Intel knows this, which is why it's trying to reinvent itself as not just a chip designer, but a manufacturing powerhouse again. The company has announced massive investments in new fabs, hoping to compete with TSMC and Samsung. But building fabs takes years, costs billions, and requires flawless execution. Intel's track record in recent years doesn't inspire confidence. The question is, can Intel really catch up, or is it too late? Let's not forget the human side of this story. Intel's decline has real consequences for employees, investors, and consumers. Thousands of jobs are at stake. Billions of dollars in market value have been lost. And consumers are left wondering whether the brand they trusted for decades is still worth trusting. For young audiences, especially those aged 18 to 35, this story hits differently. You grew up in a world where Intel was everywhere. But now you're living in a world where alternatives are not just available, they're better. That shift changes the way you think about technology, about loyalty, and about the future. So where does this leave us? Intel's fall is not the end of the story. It's a chapter in a larger narrative about innovation, competition, and survival. The company still has a chance to reinvent itself, but the window is closing fast. If Intel can't deliver breakthroughs in AI GPUs and manufacturing, it risks becoming irrelevant in the very industry it once dominated. And that, perhaps, is the most shocking part of this story. The idea that the company that defined the PC era might not define the future of computing. As we wrap up, remember this: Intel's fall is a lesson for all of us. Success is fragile. Innovation is relentless. And in the world of technology, the only constant is change. If you want to stay ahead, if you want to understand where the future is headed, you need to pay attention to stories like this. Because the fall of Intel isn't just about one company, it's about the future of technology itself.